Good morning and welcome to this week's IGTV. Today I'm talking about, that's it, you're grounded. That moment when your child has completely crossed the line. They've crossed the line so far that you're going to lose your mind and they're going to lose, well, maybe their life. And so out of your mouth comes something similar to what your parents said because that's what worked. And then the second part, right? And don't come out until you've thought about what you did. Were you told these things? Someone put a heck yeah in the comment. Let's just start on level ground, shall we? I want to talk about grounding today. Grounding as a consequence. Grounding as a form of behavior change. Grounding as a tool for consequencing. Your child and your teenager, and what works, recent studies, and what's not working, so that you can begin to shift perhaps your perspective in the way that you see workable consequences that create lasting behavior change. Okay, my name is Allie Payne. I am a certified life coach, certified relationship systems coach. I've been working with parents of teens ages 13 to 18 for approximately 15 years now. I'm also a mom of two now young adult men, so I've raised my own teens. I was an extremely troubled teen. I've done all the things, I've said all the things, I've tried most of the things. I really put my parents through the ringer. So what I'm sharing with you today is based on my own experience, my training, scientific evidence, and what I have found specifically is working for parents of teens today. If that sounds like you are welcome here. And just in case you were wondering if this was a space where you were going to get told what a crappy parent you are or how you're doing it all wrong, and well, that's not this. I don't do parent shaming, and I just wanted to put that up front. I have no space for parent shaming. I think that we are all doing our very best we can in probably the hardest job in the entire world for which there is no training. So take a breath and know that you are welcome here. All right. Okay, so let's talk about grounding as a consequence. Seriously, right? Because if you grew up when I grew up, there was no cell phones. So the first go-to consequence for parents, of my parents' generation, they're baby boomers, maybe even Gen X, well, no, they're baby boomers, but I mean, the first natural consequence, the first thing to come out of their mouths was, that's it, you're grounded. Now, if there had been phones, I'm pretty sure they would have said, that's it, I'm taking your phone, which seems to be our go-to. Also, doesn't generally work. Grounding was a way of, actually, if you look up the research on it, it's basically like a curfew, an enforced longer than normal curfew where you are prohibited from participating in normal or pleasurable activities. Okay, so that's it, you're grounded. That's what the intention was, that's what it meant. The problem with grounding is that grounding for teenagers is similar to what we have now learned with toddlers and timeouts. Toddlers and timeouts in the old sense of the word, okay, a timeout where our child was told to go to the corner or go sit somewhere and they needed to think about what they did or somehow fix how they were being, like change how they were being. A toddler, really? No, they don't have that capacity before they re-engaged. And grounding is to teenagers very similar. Go in your room, you are no longer allowed to participate or you are prohibited from participating in otherwise normal or pleasurable experiences until you can show me that you have changed. Now, if you're familiar with the TARDIS, you know, like when they go in, like people in the movies, like they go into like this magical room and then like appear out, like kind of like Narnia. Your teenager's room is not that. No. Your teenager's room is not a magical time capsule where they walk through the door and then after a set period of time that you have stipulated, they will come out magically changed. I'm sorry if that is hard to hear, but their room is not a TARDIS or a time capsule or the back of the closet like Narnia. They don't just come out changed. It doesn't happen. So let's be real about that. My experience of being grounded was because I often felt extremely controlled, unheard, shut down, diminished, suppressed, oppressed. When I was in my room, all I was doing was working up. So escalating. I was working up how angry I was at my parents, how disrespected I felt, how annoyed I was by their choices. I was just further entrenching my position, quite frankly. I was not magically changing my mind. No. In fact, I often did not feel remorseful. And I think it's important for you to hear that. When I was grounded or sent to my room, I did not feel remorseful. I felt more enraged and unheard. So just notice that. Now, if you haven't already done my 10-day listening challenge, I know I've talked about it a lot lately, but in there are specific tools to help you communicate in a way with your teenager, even when they are escalated, that brings them down so they feel heard and that you can actually have a conversation. So if you haven't done my listening challenge, if you're here on Instagram, you can tap on my name, then the link in my bio, and it's right at the top, 10-day free listening challenge. If you're here on YouTube, I can post the link below. Pop a follow for both of those. Subscribe on YouTube, follow here on Instagram. So it entrenched my position and escalated me. It did not calm me down or magically change my mind. Okay. So let's be honest about that. The other thing that I wanted to say about this is that I understand as a parent, I understand your intention in grounding your child. 100%. And let me make it very clear. I am not opposed to grounding as a consequence. I am not opposed to grounding as a consequence. Okay? I think there's a time and a place for it, and there's a way to do it that will help actually teach your teenager. It will mentor them, maintain their emotional regulation, which are two of the things that lead to lasting behavior change. Okay? So your teen does something that's got you all fired up, and your first reaction is probably one of two things. Either that's it, you're grounded, or give me your phone. For this point, we're going to talk about as grounding. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily, except that it may be that you came to that decision, that command, if you will, through your own emotional dysregulation. You had, in the words of Dr. Daniel Siegel, you had flipped your lid. Your emotion center was no longer, this is an adult, calm, regulated brainstem, okay? Brain, frontal lobes, prefrontal cortex, emotional brain. And when you are in a state of fight or flight, is it fight, fawn, flight, fight, flight, fawn, freeze, faint? I don't know. It's all the F words, okay? It's a stress response. There's a chart on my Instagram a couple days ago. Anyway, once you are dysregulated, aka your teenager really pushes all your button and pisses you off, you are no longer regulated, so it's likely that you will retaliate, which is normal, okay? I have zero judgment about that. Zero. It is normal for your brain, because now you are in defense, you are dysregulated, and you probably have gotten defensive, for you to come back on the offense, to push back. And that retaliation can sound like, that's it, you're grounded. Okay? So, the point of this is a couple things. It's helping you to be emotionally regulated to respond to your teenager's behavior, even when I'm not talking about being all like, go ahead, piss me off. I'm so happy. No. Like, can we be real for one? Like, that doesn't happen. That's why monks can't have children. They'd lose their zen. No, I'm not. Okay, that's a joke. But this isn't about not having emotions. It's about having emotions for you, but not reacting from them. Because I guarantee you, your teen's brain, because it's not fully formed yet. In fact, it's in the second and final growth phase of the human lifetime. It is not formed. So their amygdala is always slightly showing. They're highly reactive, very emotional. So if you react, I promise you, you're going to escalate your teen and you're going to escalate the conflict. Now, grounding. There's just so much stuff I want to cover on this because there's the way that you approach it, which is important to discuss because you're here with me right now, right? And then there's what works for your teenager. So I heard a study last year from my colleague. It was not Dr. Cameron Caswell. She did not do the study, but she shared the study with me. That the recent studies on grounding show that more than 7 days loses its efficacy, so it becomes pointless, because after 7 days, your teenager is likely to experience greater anxiety, isolation, depression, and if grounding for them looks like how it did for me, where I was basically put in my room, but my parents, get this, grounding me gave my parents the right to stonewall me. Did you get that? So it was highly punitive. Not only was I sent into a state where I was not allowed to participate in otherwise normal or pleasurable experiences, I was shamed with the silent treatment. Okay, so I wasn't ever heard. Like, there was no conversation. And let me tell you, if there was conversation about why I was grounded, it wasn't about me talking at all. It was about my parents lecturing me about what they thought and they felt, which wasn't entirely wrong. It's just that I never, ever got an opportunity to say anything. So it also increased the experience for me of being unloved, hopeless, powerless, and the back end of powerless, when it happens enough, rage. Rage comes from an experience of feeling out of control, having no voice, feeling powerless over a span of time is rage. That's what ends up happening. So, recent studies show that after 7 days, those are experiences your teenager might have. If you're grounding in the old school way, okay, you can't do anything that you like or want, and we're not going to talk to you, okay? So I'm saying I'm not against grounding, but there is a way to do it. That is extremely punitive and shaming if you're going to do it the old school way. And I promise you, you will never see the behavior change that you want because you have not engaged in what I call, it's my compassionate consequence formula, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second here, to help you actually see lasting behavior change. So, is grounding appropriate? Yes. Grounding would be appropriate. These are just some examples. Please don't this isn't like the only circumstances written in stone, okay? You know your child. I trust you. I believe in you. These are some examples I would use. If my teenager had broken curfew consistently, and we've had a number of conversations, so not the first time, not the second time, because that's my compassionate consequence formula, which I'll cover in a sec. We'd had a number of conversations and they were still breaking it. I might ground them. Now, when I say ground a teenager, my teenagers, I would allow them to use my vehicle sometimes. So first of all, they'd have no vehicle privileges, none, and they wouldn't be going out to parties. I'm not going to make them sit in their room necessarily because I don't believe in stonewalling, but there'd be no going out and no using my vehicle for 7 days. Okay. That's only step one. Now, grounding you could use for some other things, but if you've heard any of my discussions about consequences, it must be a correlated consequence. So unlike our parents who were not taught any of these skills and did the best that they could. Throwing grounding out just because you've watched this video and now you're like a badass expert at it, no. It still needs to be a correlated consequence. So grounding really only works if it's related to something. Okay? It's what we are finding in relationship studies is that if you pick a consequence that is very far reaching from the behavior that you want to change, it will have very little impact. Which is why the I'll take your phone thing then doesn't do anything unless the transgression has to do with the phone, right? If the transgression has to do with the phone, then taking the phone makes a little bit of sense. So grounding is still reasonable, but be careful just with this 7-day window. I recently saw a post in one of my groups, this poor mama, she was just at her absolute wit's end. She was heartbroken, felt so betrayed by her child for every good reason. I won't go into the story. And she had said she was going to ground him for a month. And that's okay. Like, bless her, okay? She was literally thinking that was the safest, best consequence in that moment. Grand. And I gave her the same information, okay? And maybe she changed her mind and maybe she didn't. That's okay. So no more than 7 days. Now, here's where I'm going to circle into my compassionate consequence formula. Putting a toddler in a timeout, like just as a timeout, or putting a teenager in their room and grounding them alone will do nothing. My compassionate consequence formula, which is available in my Become a Boundaries Boss online program, it's also one of the entire modules in my Empowered Parent Mastermind, both the self-paced and the live program. Comes with a whole flow chart, worksheet, so you can go through consequences, follow the flow chart, and actually come up with something that works better for you and your teen. Because why? Because you're looking for lasting behavior change. Isn't that the whole point of this whole grounding thing? This is how we got into the conversation. You are trying to help your teenager, or force your teenager sometimes, to change their behavior. Okay, well, what you need to understand is all behavior is communication. Okay, so sometimes your teen is acting out as a form of, I don't feel heard, I don't know how else to get your attention. Sometimes your teenager is acting out because why? All behavior starts in emotions. All of it. The whole darn thing. So knowing those two things, that's another reason why simply throwing them in a room and locking the door, throwing away the key is unworkable, because you're not addressing the emotional root of the action, the choice, the behavior. And that's why behavior doesn't change. So my compassionate consequence formula is this. Before you do the grounding, or even if you're at the grounding stage, okay? You must stay in. Curious. Get curious. Phrases like, help me to understand. Help me to understand this. I know I'm not you, and I'm not a teen anymore, and it's different now to be a teen. Help me to understand. So did you see I threw in some empathy and validation in there? Again, that's in my free 10-day listening challenge, which you can get to via the link in my bio if you want to just jump into that. Empathize and validate while you get curious, okay? Because why? Because getting curious creates emotional and psychological safety, so that you are more likely to hear and access the emotional root of your teenager's choices or behavior, okay? So you get curious. Do not go in there all guns a-blazing and assume that you know. Don't do that. That's how I was raised. My parents had a less than flattering opinion of me, which really was not true. And I was never allowed to speak. I had no voice. And let me tell you, rage was just one of the impacts of that. Years of estrangement, lots of things. So be curious first. You are not your teen. It is not the same to grow up as a teen now as it was before. I don't care how much better you think their life is than what you had. Get curious, okay? Number 2, in the curiosity, you must be compassionate. Be compassionate with your teen, okay? They are going through a massive brain renovation, which wires their brain for risky behavior and is driven mostly by, amygdala, emotions, not driven by intellectual decision-making thought processes, risk analysis. It's not. So stop pretending. I'm not saying it's okay for them to do all the BS banana stuff they're doing. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying be compassionate. They want to know more than anything that even if there's a consequence for a behavior that they have chosen to do, that your love is unconditional. That you love them in the hot mess they are in. The cry of a teenager's heart is, even when I mess up, now do you love me? Even if I need to be different than you, do you love me? Even when I can't be like you, it's not authentic for me, do you love me? Be compassionate, okay, for the hot mess that they're in. Doesn't mean you agree. I am not saying agree. I'm not saying you can't have emotion around this, okay? Be compassionate with them. Conversation. That's a great, if your teen doesn't get ready in the morning and makes everyone else late, then it sounds like they're staying home and they've missed their ride. Why are you catering to them being late? It's basically what ends up happening here, and I'm going to be really honest with you, is they have you well trained. They have you well trained because you continue to compensate for their lack of being able to get up. It doesn't make them a bad person. It's not a moral judgment. It just is. So if they can't get up on time, they don't get to control everyone else's experience of the morning. You're in charge of your experience. So go create it. Okay, so a consequence, natural consequence is, we love you. This is what time we're leaving. We will be ready in the vehicle at this time. And if you're not there, you're going to miss your ride. Happy to come up with some alternatives for you. But the rest of us, we're not going to play into this game anymore. So that's a great question because I get that one a lot. All right. Conversation. You need to have conversation. I just modeled some of that there. The conversation with your teen, and I hope you're listening to this part, doesn't mean you're doing all the talking. No, because that's called a lecture. That's not listening. That's called a lecture. This is not a lecture. Remember I said all behavior is driven by emotion. You are not going to discover that emotion that was the initiator of the choice or the behavior your teenager made if you are doing all the talking. A conversation, once you're being curious, compassionate, conversation looks like asking questions. Like I said, help me to understand, or just get real. Will ya? Get real with your teen. Maybe, if it feels appropriate, share a very short, brief story of something that you did similar. Like how you snuck out, how your parents caught you sneaking alcohol from the liquor cabinet. The time your parents, caught you like drunk puking on the front yard. I don't know, but be real. Every relationship study ever done shows that trust is only built with transparency. Trust is built with transparency. Two sides of the same piece of plywood. So perhaps in these conversations, if your teenager is grounded for a week, you sit down with them and say, hey, look, I did some stupid stuff like this. I did this when I was a teen. And I remember, now keep it short. Teenagers' propensity to listen to your stories is very low. So what did you do? What did you want to happen? What did happen? And what did you learn? That's it. Stick to those 4 points. Nothing more. Okay? Then go back to asking another question. Go back to saying, hey, what were you looking for? Like, what did you want? Because remember, we only do any behavior because of an emotional root. There's an experience we're looking for. There's a feeling we're looking for. Your teenager may not be able to express any of this. That's okay. The point is, you are as willing to listen more, 51%, probably 60 actually, and only talk 40. Okay? These conversations are what change behavior. Not the grounding itself. Although grounding, certainly, it's appropriate sometimes, for sure. But grounding alone will not, never has, never will change your teenager's mind, decision-making, or behavior. Ever. So my compassionate consequence formula takes you through all these steps with all the scripts. It's a flow chart. Thanks, Fina. My gorgeous friend Fina here is here. Lovely. Give her a follow. Grounding certainly is an opportunity for your teenager to do more thinking. But without you being willing to mentor, guide, and love them through the consequence of grounding, you are ensuring you will get more of that behavior and perhaps worse. Your teenager does not have the intellectual functioning to process what they did wrong, why you don't like it, God forbid, even assume why you don't like it, because if you're being stonewalled in your room, how are you supposed to have any assumption other than that you did not just make a mistake? You are a mistake, and that is shame. So there's a fine line on how to work this grounding, and again, it can be a very powerful tool if it's coupled with helping your teenagers. Now, your teen's brain is still very much in the process and will be for years, I am sorry to break it to you, developing emotional impulse control, emotional regulation, critical analysis, decision-making, independent values, beliefs, all those things. Their brain is growing, literally growing, and developing software, the capacity for all of these things. But tell me, just because I put a new hard drive in a computer, does it just all of a sudden work? No. I need some software techie person to sit and give it all the correct software. Just because you put a new piece of hardware in the computer doesn't mean the computer's any better. No, it doesn't. Your job as a parent is to help their brain develop those critical skills. So if you're going to use grounding, by being in curious, compassionate conversation while you work through a consequence so that you connect. Did you like all those C words? I kind of love them all myself. That is how you will help their brain to learn to regulate, for one. Because why? Because you're modeling regulation. You are responding, not reacting. You're modeling regulation. You are helping their brain to regulate. You are helping their intellectual brain, which is still very much forming, to process the emotional root, the experience they were trying to create, what they chose, why it maybe wasn't a good choice. Maybe it wasn't a bad choice per se, but things went bad, and what they could do next time. Not because you're going to lecture them. No, because you're going to get curious and help their brain to develop this. You are helping their brain to develop the software to run all that new hardware in there. That's why my compassionate consequence formula is proven to create lasting behavior change. Now, again, you can do it with grounding, but it requires you to participate with your teen, not lock your teen away. Yes, Fina, so true. When you model regulation to your teenager, it helps build their self-esteem. This entire process, Fina, that's such a wonderful point. This entire process I'm talking about actually helps build your teenager's self-esteem, because you are showing disagree with what they've got to say and what they're processing through this behavior, this isn't about whether you agree or don't agree. This is about helping their brain to process the emotional experience they were looking for, the choice they made, what were some of their thoughts, because they don't have an adult brain. They don't have an adult level of intellectual awareness. They don't have all of the things that your brain has. That doesn't mean that they need to agree with you. No, it doesn't. So, grounding in itself, totally a reasonable consequence to, if so long as it is relatively correlated to the transgression, okay? So correlated consequence, grounding can work no more than 7 days or it loses its efficacy. The only way that grounding works, ever, is if you are prepared to, rather than your parents did with you, where you were put in a room, locked and thrown away the key, and then you got the silent treatment from them for a week just to prove how shameful you were, how embarrassing, how wrong you were. Yeah, that's so 1999, okay? Even early, we're not gonna do that anymore. We don't, no. It works if you are prepared to participate with them as a mentor to help get to the emotional root of the behavior that they chose, and then help them to process through curious, compassionate conversation what they did, why they chose it. Maybe you share a little of what the crappy decisions you made and what you learned. You have a little bit of humor in it. Be compassionate with them. Have a few laughs. That is how grounding can be used as an effective consequence to create lasting behavior change. If you're interested in my compassionate consequence formula, you can find it right away if you tap on my name and then the link in my bio and you go to online programs, Become a Boundaries Boss. It's all about setting boundaries and consequences. It's all in there. I have some of my live programs coming up in September, the Empowered Parent Mastermind, my 8-week in-depth deep dive parenting program. We cover all the things and we do live Zoom calls. So it's a lot of personal mentoring. We talk about the compassionate consequence formula in there as well. I hope this has been helpful for you in creating some context for you around grounding in itself and how grounding actually can have some of the lasting benefit that you're looking for, rather than continuing to drive lower self-esteem with your teen, as Fina mentioned, drive disconnection, increase conflict, and keep you both in a state of dysregulation because what went wrong has never really been discussed. There's been no room. It's like trying to hold the lid on a boiling pot. Have you ever tried to hold the lid on a boiling pot? There's a lot of pressure in there. And that's why my compassionate consequence formula works. So grounding, you decide. Just remember what you're aiming for, because if you're only aiming for retaliation, that's an issue. And I love you in it. That's an issue. It's okay to also change your mind. If you're sitting watching this and your teen is grounded right now for a month, it's okay to go into them and say, yeah, you know what? I heard this like kind of wackadoodle lady on the internet talking. I think we need to have more conversation and maybe less grounding. Who knows? You know, wherever you're at, I respect and I love you there. Again, my name is Allie Payne. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Allie Payne or on my YouTube channel here. So hit the follow, give me a subscribe, and stay tuned for all of my live programs that are coming up in September, or you can always find them online via the link in my bio or my website, alliepayne.com. Thank you so much. Thanks, Heidi. Thanks for joining me. Post your comments and insights below. I will get this up on my profile and on YouTube very quickly, and I will see you again next Thursday for more parenting teens talk. Bye, everyone.